into this story with Piers Morgan and Ben Shapiro. Yikes. So you have to keep in mind, I believe this is the first interview that Ben Shapiro has done where he is going to be questioned about Candace Owens firing. So just buckle up your seatbelt for this one. First and foremost, there's a discussion here about what should happen in reference to Gaza. I do want to touch on this piece, and then we'll transition into the conversation about Candace. I don't know about you, but Ben Shapiro does appear, in my opinion, to be a bit nervous in this interview, not as confident as he usually comes across. Listen to this.
Saying there.
Do you feel comfortable, but we've talked about this war a lot. Do you feel comfortable about a full assault on Rafah if 1.5 million people remain in that vicinity, including majority women and children? Because it would obviously be, in that instance, devastating in terms of civilian casualties and would pour even more pressure on Israel and lose them even more support. I mean, do you think this is the right strategy?
Well, I think that Israel is pretty united in its belief that it is. And Israel, I think, is best positioned to adjudicate its own interests when it comes to things like you're talking about, whether it's international support or the future of the Gaza Strip.
So here's the first problem. Piers didn't ask him whether or not Israel thought it was the right strategy. Piers is asking him, does he think it is the right strategy? So just pay attention to that.
Understanding is from all of the public discussions that have been happening that there's significant discussion about how to try to move civilians out of the way. One of the big problems has been that Egypt won't open the gate, even temporarily, to allow enough civilians outside of Rafah so that Israel can perform operations inside of Rafah. Apparently, there are 4 Hamas battalions that are currently located inside of Rafah. I'm sure that if the United States or the...
Pause. So first of all, Ben Shapiro has a tendency to talk really fast so that... It sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Like, I'm going to speak really fast, so you're not going to really pay attention to what he's saying, or maybe you won't be able to keep up with what he's saying. But I'm paying attention to what he's saying. First of all, it is not Egypt's responsibility to take in anyone. I want to be very clear. Egypt didn't start this conflict. This conflict has been escalated by Israel and the United States. The U.S. government has been providing the weapons. Israel has been committing the assault on the Palestinian people in Gaza. Egypt had nothing to do with this. It is not on Egypt to bear responsibility here. This is a horrible talking point, and I want us to learn how to push back on this because it's just no. You know, and he speaks so quickly. So even if Piers was going to try to interrupt, it's like, whoa, where do I even interject here? No, this is not on Egypt. And I'm tired of people like Ben Shapiro saying this and other people saying this as well. He's not alone. Ron DeSantis has made this comment. Republicans and Democrats have made this comment, by the way. So this is bipartisan, this view. You do not get to excuse Israel's assault on the Palestinian people because Egypt won't let the Palestinian people come in. That is another Zionist talking point.
International community could offer Israel some sort of Harry Potter spell to disappear all of the Hamas terrorists inside Rafah. I'm sure Israel would take it. The last thing Israel wants to do is maximize civilian casualties. What's been perfectly obvious is that Hamas has precisely the opposite view. They would love to maximize civilian casualties because the increasing civilian death toll, as you've pointed out, has been the single factor that's been leading to increased pressure on Israel to leave Hamas alone.
No, Ben is not strong here. I don't know what happened before this interview. You know, I don't agree with most things that Ben Shapiro agrees with. But in this particular discussion, he does come across a bit nervous to me. Different than before. You guys have seen him in debates before. This isn't even really a debate at this point. But he does not seem confident with what he is saying. Israel is not trying to prevent civilian casualties at any point. When you have IDF soldiers that are just shooting at civilians point blank, women that are trying to leave the church, to leave a mosque, that is not trying to protect civilian casualties. Ben Shapiro knows this. He knows what Israel is doing is wrong. But see, this type of rhetoric, the Zionist rhetoric that people like Ben Shapiro grew up, these people are indoctrined. They grow up believing this way, that the land belongs to them and no one else, that everything should be first when it comes to Israel, Israel first, that the Israelis have a right to kick the Palestinian people out of their homes in the West Bank. He grew up believing this way. And so Ben Shapiro, he has to actually, people don't understand this term, but he has to actually decolonize his mind. And that's not easy to do, especially when you've been believing this, you were taught this, it's ingrained in you. It's not easy to do. Let's go on.
What do you make of Biden really turning on Netanyahu? I mean, this decision not to veto this resolution is the latest escalation, really, in the American administration under Biden reining back its support of Israel. How significant is that? And what do you think about Biden doing this?
I mean, obviously, I think that he's morally wrong to abstain from a resolution that seems to disconnect the hostage situation from the ceasefire. All of the versions the United States had been pushing prior suggested that in order for a ceasefire to be called for or attained, there had to be a release of the hostages. This particular version of the UN resolution sort of separates off the two issues, doesn't mention Hamas, doesn't mention October 7th. That's the point of contention with regard to the UN Security Council resolution the United States abstained from. As far as the sort of increased pressure.
I'm sorry. Again, he's off his game here. We covered the ceasefire resolution. We covered this on the show. It absolutely was asking for the release of the hostages. That's why I said Ben is off his game, like seriously, in this discussion.
That Biden or Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader here, have been putting on the Netanyahu administration. Frankly, I think it's political dishonesty. I think that there are a lot of members of the Democratic Party who are very critical of Israel's government full scale. They're trying to put it on Netanyahu because they realize that a lot of the sort of liberal Jewish base in the United States that votes Democrat supports Israel, but also doesn't like Netanyahu very much. But they're ignoring the central reality in Israel, which is that there is full-scale public support for going into Rafah from right, left, and center. The current government of the state of Israel is a war cabinet, including the chief rival to Benjamin Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, who just visited the United States, and in fact was treated to much of the same language by the Biden administration. So to suggest that it's sort of Netanyahu's own political domestic manipulations leading to his desire to go into Rafah, Netanyahu is in fact correct when he suggests that there is broad public support for going into Rafah. And in fact, if the current war cabinet does not go into Rafah, there's a very solid chance that the government of Israel falls in their new elections.
I mean,
if the government of Israel falls, it's its own fault. It's its own fault. First of all, let's go ahead and push back on something here. The majority of Democrat politicians in DC support Israel. Ben is lying. He's wrong here again. The majority of them support Israel. The majority of them vote for the legislation in favor of that legislation to send arms to Israel. So when he's talking about the Democrat politicians and he's like, well, yeah, they're against. No. There is a difference between criticizing Netanyahu and sending arms to Israel. And I've said this before. Netanyahu is the easy target. So if you can criticize him all you want, but if you're still sending him weapons, then your criticism doesn't have any weight. They still back Israel. They still support Israel. And so does the Republican Party. Both parties support the state of Israel. You cannot make this a partisan issue, Ben Shapiro. The ultimate problem is Zionism, but he don't want to touch that.
That is true about the support, definitely, but it's also true that a majority of people in Israel want to get rid of Netanyahu. So this is a support for,
but not during the actual conflict, right? What the polls show is that Israelis would love to have another election, but not right at the moment, meaning that they've had 5 elections in 4 years. It's always sort of weird when people talk about Israel needs a new election. They have more new elections than Taylor Swift has outfit changes during one of her concerts. It's not as.
Why is it weird that people are talking about Israel having another or more election or want them to have an election when the United States government has done this with other countries all over the world? When the United States government, you see, I'm going to show you the difference. The United States government has installed leaders in countries like Haiti, They've overthrown leaders. And it was totally fine because those are black and brown countries. It's fine when they intervene in Iraq. It's fine when they intervene in Haiti. It's fine when they intervene in Syria. It's fine when they intervene in Afghanistan. It's only problematic when it's Israel.
So there's a lack of elections. I do find it sort of strange that there's always a call for new elections in Israel, which again has many, many elections. I have yet to hear for a call for elections in, say, the West Bank or Gaza Strip, where there has not been an election since 2005. And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is because everybody understands if there were an election in the Gaza Strip or West Bank, Hamas would actually win. What
I don't understand about Israel's strategy is how they perceive actual victory. Yes, you can take out the 30 to 35,000 Hamas terrorists. Yeah, maybe they can do that. And maybe in the process of that, they kill tens of thousands more civilians and have to deal with the contention that will cause worldwide. And maybe Israelis don't care about that part as long as they get rid of Hamas. So let's get to an end game where Hamas has gone. Why does leveling Gaza and killing so many civilians, why would that give anyone in Israel any kind of comfort that would kill off the ideology that fueled Hamas, that it wouldn't actually just lead to an increase in that ideology, more hatred towards Israelis, more hatred towards Jewish people? I've never quite understood what the end game looks like here for Israel that makes Israel more secure.
In other words, Piers Morgan is asking, what is the end game? When all this is said and done, what is the end game?
Well, I mean, the end game presumably is security, not a sort of dynamic ideological scoring among a population that right now overwhelmingly supports the October 7th attacks, and prior to October 7th, overwhelmingly supported terror attacks against the state of Israel. And
pause. So he said the end game is security. Israel has the Iron Dome. Gaza doesn't have an Iron Dome. Israel has a military. Gaza does not have a military. Israel gets $3.8 billion from the United States every year. Boston, okay, my city here, Boston, sends $10 million to Israel. But we got people out here on the street. You can't fund the schools that are falling apart, but you can give $10 million to Israel. So when it comes to security, the people who are not secure are the Palestinians in Gaza and the Palestinians in the West Bank. The Palestinians being dragged out of their homes in the West Bank have no security. That's why this is continuing to happen. The Palestinians in Gaza have no security. How do you think Hamas was created? How do you think a Hamas comes about? When you oppress people and you occupy people and you treat them in such a way, what do you think happens? And then you have to look at what international law says. International law says that occupied people have a right to resist. Again, this is another Zionist talking point. Make themselves seem like they are the ultimate victim when they have more resources, they have better weapons, they have better technology, they all have health care, they control the resources, but they make themselves seem like they're the ultimate victim.
Overwhelmingly supported the destruction of the state of Israel. The sort of idea that more conciliation from Israel was bringing about peaceful conditions with the Palestinian Authority or with Hamas has been obviously proved false by the fact that Israel literally withdrew all IDF forces from the Gaza Strip in 2005. Hamas took control. They spent the last 20 years turning it into...
That's a lie. He's being disingenuous. He's not telling you that Israel still goes in and mows the lawn. They withdrew IDF troops in 2005. They have continued to go in there and to mow the lawn. And Ben is leaving that out on purpose.
A giant terror base. From the Israeli perspective, my assumption is that what they are figuring is degrade Hamas's military capacity such that they cannot be an offensive threat to the state of Israel, and then try to enact some sort of military control of the area sufficient to prevent any future threat from arising from that area. I'm sure that Israel would love to hand the area over to Egypt. Egypt says no. Egypt doesn't want any part of it.
This is not Egypt's responsibility. So you see how he's trying to put the blame on another country that had nothing to do with this in order to excuse the IDF's actions.
would love to hand it over to Jordan. Jordan says no. Jordan doesn't want any part of it. Israel's tried to hand it over to the Saudis, to the UAE, to the United States, to literally anyone. No one wants to run that area specifically because the population is already quite radicalized and was radicalized before October 7th. And so,
no, that is not why they don't want to run that area. First of all, this assumption that all Muslim people have the same culture and you should just take them in because you're Muslim and they're Muslim too, that's ignorance. That's ignorance. And two, when you talk about them not wanting to have ownership over in the countries that you mentioned, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, these are countries that are aligned with the United States government. Saudi Arabia is kind of stepping, has actually one foot out the door because they're also part, the BRICS as well. But still, these are countries that are aligned with the US government. I mean, come on. Joe Biden just met with the Princess of Jordan. So why would you expect them to get involved here? And then three, excuse me, again, it is not their responsibility to fix the colonization, the occupation, and the oppression that Israel caused. That is not their responsibility. And these countries don't always have the resources and the money to handle that as well. Instead of blaming the oppressor, Ben Shapiro was blaming the neighboring countries that had nothing to do with this.
What you're probably going to end up with, and I said this, I think, the first time I appeared on the show, which was shortly after October 7th in this context, what you're probably going to end up with is some form of joint military rule in the Gaza Strip in which Israel has the intelligence capacity to go in and conduct raids in terror hotbeds the same way that they do right now, for example, in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, places like Jenin, places like Nablus. The IDF is constantly attempting to go in and root out terror cells in these particular areas. One of the big flaws that led to October 7th was the fact that Israel had no forces on the ground and no actual intelligence capability inside the Gaza Strip.
Oh, all of a sudden on that day, they just didn't have anything. I told you that was always weird to me, especially when information was released that they actually had read the plans about this attack that was going to happen over a year ago, but they chose not to entertain it because they felt that it was, I guess, adventurous, so to speak. They didn't think that this could actually be accomplished. But Ben Shapiro is not on his A game there. At this point, you can't. Joe Rogan's not even defending it anymore. Joe Rogan's not even defending Israel anymore. You lost the plot, Ben, and you also lost the plot in reference to the Candace situation. So Piers Morgan went there.
One of the consequences of this war has been a lot of very high passions on both sides, a lot of angry disagreements. You and your company have been at the center of a very high-profile one at the moment with Candace Owens, who's now left Daily Wire. Was she fired or did she leave of her own volition?
I'm not going to speak to this topic, Piers.
I guess this has been the week of I'm not going to speak to that topic. Marianne Williamson said this to Bree. Ben Shapiro is saying this to Piers Morgan. But kudos to Piers for not giving up. I will give him credit for this because I think some people will just back down here. But Piers continues to push. You don't want to speak about it, Ben. Why? Why don't you want to speak about it? Because Ben wants to make sure that he keeps his spot at the Daily Wire, right? Ben don't want to comment about it. Ben had his hands involved in this. I'm going to show you how he did. Ben had his hands involved in this, but Ben does not want to talk about it, okay? He want to throw stones and hide his damn hand, all right? You ain't got nothing to say, Ben. Come clean, Ben.
At all?
At all.
You can't give me any insight into why she departed?
No hints, no nothing. I'm not going to speak to this.
Can I ask why?
I mean, you can ask.
No, I'm not. Can I ask why you don't want to say anything?
What a coward. What a coward. How much they paying you, Ben? How much is the Daily Wire paying you to keep your mouth shut? Woo, buddy. Candace Owens. This the person you defended, man. The number of times you defended Ben Shapiro, you see how they do you?
Again, you can ask.
I'm only curious because I know what a staunch defender of free speech you are, and it would surprise me if it had been someone's opinions that would make you want to part company with them, however contentious.
I mean, suffice it to say, the only thing I will say is what I've said all along with regard to Candace or with regard to any of our other hosts. I am not in hiring and firing position with the Daily Wire. I'm a co-founder of the Daily Wire. I'm a co-owner of the Daily Wire. I'm not actually in management. Jeremy Boring and Caleb Robinson are in management positions with regard to.
Ben is letting you know, let me tell you who the managers are, okay? I am not the manager. So it's interesting that Piers Morgan brought up, he said, I know how passionate you are about free speech. Was he though? Because I don't really believe he was really passionate about free speech. I felt that he was passionate about the type of speech that he wanted to be able to say and not receive pushback on. Ben Shapiro just released a song with this dude with dreads and whatever, braids in his hair, right? And this guy, and they're singing, I don't care if I offend you. But it's okay for Ben Shapiro to say that to everyone else, but it's not okay for you to offend Ben. Because when it comes to Israel, all of a sudden, Ben's like, no, you can't say these things. You cannot criticize Zionism. You cannot criticize the state of Israel. And not only that, but you have to put Israel first. And we'll get to that in just a second. You have to put Israel first. So it's okay for him to offend you, but it's not okay for you to offend him. So I would argue they were never really pro-free speech. They were pro-speech for the type of rhetoric that they approved of. But they weren't free speech absolutists. Because like I said, when it comes to Israel, things changed. Listen to this.
To Candace or anyone else. And as far as the free speech situation, what I will...
Let me go back a little bit, because this is just very telling. I think I was right there. Yeah.
Say is what I've said all along with regard to Candace or with regard to any of our other hosts. I am not in hiring and firing position with the Daily Wire. I'm a co-founder of the Daily Wire. I'm a co-owner of the Daily Wire. I'm not actually in management. Jeremy Boring and Caleb Robinson are in management positions with regard to Candace or anyone else. And as far as the free speech situation, what I will say is that no company has the obligation to literally pay anyone. The Daily Wire is a publisher. It is not a platform.
So here is Ben Shapiro defending the employer instead of the employee. Defending the company instead of the worker. They're not obligated to pay you. That's besides the point. I thought the Daily Wire was created so that people could have free speech, so that people could say what they wanted to say on that platform. That was the whole purpose of it, from what I understood in the very beginning. But they're hypocritical. Hypocritical about it. It's the same thing I told you about the cancel culture. I told you cancel culture is on both sides. Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Both parties do cancel culture, just about different issues. It's not a good look for the Daily Wire, I'm telling you.
I've never called for Candace or anyone else for that matter to be banned from YouTube, to be banned from X, to be banned from any platform. That's a different story, obviously, when it comes to any publisher. Any publisher gets to make decisions about what it wishes to purvey and not.
I mean, I'm just not going to labor this, but one more point I would make is it's been reported extensively that the reason for her departure was because her comments have been perceived by people at the Daily Wire as anti-Semitic.
Again, I'm not going to comment on this, Piers.
Okay.
So you guys see that? All of a sudden now you have nothing to say. Well, I'm going to comment on it because there was leaked information that was released more about Candace Owens firing. Check this out. Bombshell leak. Candace Owens was fired for saying Christ is king. 4 Daily Wire employees, all Christians, have approached me. Their identities will remain anonymous for safety reasons. And leaked information about an impromptu town hall that Jeremy Boring, CEO of Daily Wire, hosted on the day of Candace's firing. Jeremy Boring sent an email to all Daily Wire employees inviting them to an impromptu town hall in Candace Owens' studio. The town hall was led by Boring, the Andrew Clavin repeating many of the corporate talking points on his show the next day. 4 employees told me that the town hall attempted to brainwash the employees present into believing that Candace was, in fact, an anti-Semite. And they had the nerve to do this in her studio. They view it as an extreme form of damage control to scare and prevent employees from speaking out against Owens' firing later that day. The feeling was that they didn't just want her gone. They wanted everyone to hate her like Ben does. It was straight up propaganda. These subjects were brought up during the town hall. Candace's repeated use of Christ is King was deemed anti-Semitic, dating back to November when a meeting when Ben Shapiro was leaked. In the meeting, he badmouthed Owens for not being overtly pro-Israel. So you see how they all just got together and had this little private meeting about her? And the number of times that Candace defended her comrades at the Daily Wire, you see how they can all get together and gang up on you? A clip of Nick Fuentes chanting Christ is King was played. The expression made Shapiro particularly angry, and since Fuentes is deemed an anti-Semite by the ADL, it was used to suggest Owens was an anti-Semite by association. A clip from Owens on Fresh and Fit was played where a ka-ching sound effect was heard in the background. This was an attempt to associate her with the stereotype that Jews love money. The employees also told me that Ben had been bitter in his attitude towards Candace as her show was outperforming Ben's and was much better received. Oh, well, what do you know? Ben was a tad bit jealous. Look, guys, sometimes jealousy is afoot. Like that's wild. This is crazy. Now, remember, they all supposed to be one network, right? They're all supposed to be working together, but everybody has their individual shows. Shouldn't they be cheering each other on? Shouldn't they be, happy for each other? I don't know. Some employees are planning a lawsuit against the Daily Wire, feeling intimidated and threatened by the meeting, and also because of what they believe is an attack on Christianity at the company. But I thought they were supposed to be pro-Christian, though, right? I thought that was the whole, it's not like they didn't know who Candace was when they decided to have her be a part of the team. It's not like she hid that she was a Christian. She talked about this often. She talked about God. So why? I thought that was the whole point. You're supposed to be for that, though. No, they wanted her to be for Israel. They felt the phrase Christ is King was seriously deemed to be anti-Semitic by Boring, Clavin, and Ben. Which is why Ben did not want to answer that question from Piers Morgan when he said, do you think her statements have been anti-Semitic? I'm not going to go there, Piers. That's okay. We went there, Ben. It was Candace's repeated use of the phrase, along with her not being overtly pro-Israel, that ultimately led to her firing. You guys see the danger of Zionism now? After hearing this, no Christian or anyone with genuine morals should have a Daily Wire subscription or support the company in any way, shape, or form. It is clear that Christianity is under attack at the Daily Wire, with Christian employees feeling so intimidated that they are actually consulting their lawyers. That is totally unacceptable and must not be supported. Candace Owens did nothing wrong. So apparently the Daily Wire has a problem with Christianity, when I would assume the majority of the audience, let's go with half. Let's say at least half of the audience are Christian. What is this? It's giving me cult-like vibes, you know? I feel like is this a Waco? Like, what is this? You're not overtly pro-Israel. You must go. I can't. And look, I don't even agree. Like, me and Candace Owens do not agree on many things, right? But I think we agree on censorship. I think we agree on this. This is ridiculous. Is this the future? Is this where we're headed now? Is this where we're headed now? So now all of a sudden, if you're Christian and you got to be overtly Israel or you're a problem, this is ridiculous. This is the United States of America. People have freedom of religion here. You have the option to practice Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, like whatever you want. So this is, I hear you, Sharon. This is going too far. This is ridiculous. So no. And we have a separation of church and state in this country. Like is this legal? Because if they have evidence of this, those employees that came forward, is this legal? Is it legal to fire someone because of their religion? Because they don't support the religion that you want them to support? I don't think that's legal. I should reach out to one of my lawyer friends. I'm serious. Like, I don't know where to go there. But if they actually have documentation that that was the case and those things were said in that discussion, this is very problematic. No. Sabby is not trying to have that. That's ridiculous. It's crazy. I don't care. Let people practice whatever religion they want to practice. And that should not interfere with your job. Your job is your job. Your religion is your religion. Travers says it's legal in Israel. Like, what is happening in this country? This is the United States of America. This is not the United States of Israel.